want to say. She's very old now, but her sensibility is still the same, and I'm sure you're going to enjoy her performance tonight. So please, can you introduce the movie, right? Thank you very much, and enjoy the night.
Thank you so much for the wonderful introduction. Coming to this film, as you are aware that today is day 3 of the Louis Bunuel Retrospective, which also marks 40 years, of his passing. So the world has been without Louis Bunuel for 40 years. Today we have a film from his French phase, as Frederick has already touched upon, and it's a film called Belle de Jour, which translates basically to Lady of the Day. And it's a film which stars the legendary Catherine Deneuve in the lead role. And this is a film that was very important for both Bunuel as well as Catherine Deneuve, because you have to understand that Bunuel throughout his career was moving. Started off in Paris, with this wonderful film called Un Chien Andalou with Salvador Dali in the 1920s. Then, he was in Spain for some time. Then he went to Hollywood. Then Dali published his book, which really, made him this communist, anti-Catholic figure, and he had to take refuge in Mexico. He grew as an artist, and so Mexico was really a nurturing ground for him. But at the same time, even though he would stay in Mexico for the rest of his life, he would continue to go to Europe and make these amazing films. Thanks to this wonderful Polish producer that he actually met, called Sergei Silverman, and this wonderful French writer Jean-Claude Carré, and they actually made it possible that Bunuel was able to make these wonderful films even when he was 65 and beyond. And this is really, a testament to this wonderful, team that they had in place, that we had a film like Belle de Jour. It was in 1967, he was approached by Hakim Brothers, who were basically Egyptian French producers. And they said that we have this 1928 novel called Belle de Jour, and, let's adapt it. Bunuel was not really fond of that novel because he thought that it's a little bit too operatic, but he took it as a challenge and he thought, okay, let's do it. He, on the street shoots, along with his writer, Carré, and they interviewed a lot of them. They talked about their fantasies, because you have to understand that it's the 60s. And the ideas of feminism, the ideas of what a woman desires are still, considered taboo. And so that, in many ways, made this film far ahead of its time. But today, it's very much in the canon. At the time, also, it was the biggest commercial success for Louis Bunuel. Also, I must tell you that at the time, he was also dealing with partial deafness. So there was a lot of issues in communicating with Catherine Deneuve, who was fresh from the success of the great 1964 film Umbrellas of Cherbourg, and she was also trying to experiment along with his writer Carré, and they interviewed a lot of them. They talked about their fantasies, because you have to understand that it's the 60s, and the ideas of feminism, the ideas of what a woman desires are still, considered taboo. And so that, in many ways, made this film far ahead of its time. But today, it's very much in the canon. At the time, also, it was the biggest commercial success for Louis Bunuel. Also, I must tell you that at the time, he was also dealing with partial deafness. So there was a lot of issues in communicating with Catherine Deneuve, who was fresh from the success of the great 1964 film Umbrellas of Cherbourg, and she was also trying to Viridiana, and then we end with 2 films, The Criminal Life of Archibaldo de la Cruz, and the last one again, That Obscure Object of Desire. All these are masterpieces in their own ways, but probably Belle de Jour is the film, that is probably the most commercially successful, and also, one of the best known films of Louis Bunuel's career, along with a lot of other films. But somewhere the popularity of this film beats, a lot of other films, not in terms of critical acclaim, but particularly in terms of commercial success. This allowed Bunuel, to become a commercially viable director and stay more in Europe. And then he would make some interesting films, in the coming years, such as The Milky Way. And then, of course, he would continue to, tread between different territories, making Tristana in Spain, and then again, Obscure Object of Desire. So with these words, I leave you with the film. I really hope that you enjoy it. Thank you so much.